everybody, this is Perch, and I get asked from time to time about the politics inside of comic companies. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I will at least kind of convey in a generalized way what I hear. And I think it's pretty accurate, mostly because if you work in any corporation or any company, it's all going to seem very, very familiar to you. This is going to come as a big non-revelation. And so that may be comforting or it may not. I don't know. What's interesting, I think, in life is that people who work in certain industries often believe that their industry is unique in terms of kind of the inner culture and politics and other things that go on in that company. And the reality is, it isn't. Almost every company has the same struggles, same problems. It's why software companies that come in with motivational tools and other things can work in lots of different industries. You can be in medical, you can be in tech, you can be in construction, you could be in comic books. A lot of the core problems are actually the same. Oh, wait a minute. You thought I was going to talk about like Republican, Democrat, social, liberal, conservative politics. That's not at all what we're talking about here. Haha. No, probably. Hopefully, I did a good job of the thumbnail and nobody's tricked by this point. But let's talk about inside how companies work. And what's important to remember about comics, and this is really important to remember, is that the majority of people inside of the company, the people who produce the work, the big names they put on the covers and everything else, those people are independent contractors. They're not employees. Those people are on kind of short-term contracts, and increasingly over the last 30 years, those contracts have gotten more tenuous, more or less stable, and more kind of the whims that you don't always fully understand. So this is not unlike how some construction firms work. It's not unlike how Hollywood entertainment business works. In a lot of cases, you are on a job by job basis. If you, in theory, if you do a good job and whatever you did is recognized as, professional, competent, smart, strong, help sell books, help the company grow, whatever it happens to be, then you'll be renewed and life will continue. The challenge with this is numerous where comic books are concerned. First of all, the numbers are often obscured, and they've been more so since the pandemic. So from a pure financial analysis standpoint, there are many creators out there who have no idea how well their books are selling. Their only kind of gauge is maybe attention they get on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or kind of vague estimates that Comic-Con or others are doing. Now, the challenge with Comic-Con, and keep in mind, I've seen a lot of videos kind of calling them garbage and other things. They're not. John Jackson Miller and the team over there are doing a fine job. They're doing the best they can with the information they have, and they show the math. And this is kind of the most important part, is they are explaining how it is that they're coming to the numbers they're coming to. They're putting up estimates right now because they don't have precise information. And they're doing so with a combination of Comics Hub data and kind of other things. But he's got it all listed out there. Many people don't read, how he's coming to that information. It's kind of like the person who, pulls out this kind of mechanical model or something out of the box, doesn't bother to read the instructions, proceeds to put it together wrong, and then wonders what went wrong. Well, the instructions were there. In the case of Comic-Con, how he's coming to his data is there. You can disagree with the way he came to the data, and I think part of the estimates he's giving are way off, but I don't believe it's because his method is wrong. I believe we're missing too many parts of data. Because we're missing too much of the data, you're not going to get the most accurate results. Something, by the way, he says himself. He's like this. This is a educated guess in a lot of cases based on data. It's better. It's more than a guess, but he's missing big parts of it. So that's why he's giving big ranges to things. And in some cases, the problem with relying on Comics Hub, for example, is Comics Hub is not actually utilized in many places. It's actually in a very small amount of places, and so the regions that use it are going to heavily influence the numbers, and that's why you get some things the way they are. But we were talking about internal politics. The reality is, inside of comic companies, there's a lot of insecurity. A lot of creators they do not, and when I say insecurity, means like lack of security. Maybe a better way to put it. There's plenty of comic creators who are very comfortable with what they do. They, of course, would like to keep working. They'd like to stay on a title, but they understand the game. They understand that, it's based on sales. It's based on the personality types of the editors that are there and holes that come in. And there's a lot of factors that could lead them being taken off of books. And that's nothing to take personally. There's a greater number of creators, I would say. Well, I don't know greater, but there's a large group of creators who haven't figured that out yet, and thus are very, very insecure. So they look for places to apply leverage. There is a decent amount of backstabbing that goes on within comic companies. There are writers who will sabotage other writers. There are creators who have a book who are pretty nasty about it. Now, the funny thing about it is these creators, they're rarely doing it invisible. In fact, it's kind of this strange thing. You might relate to this with your workplace. The people who think they're playing the best, most aggressive politics are usually very transparent, and everybody knows what it is they're doing. Well, there's a lot of people. There's a couple names that come to mind at Marvel and at DC who, regularly will. I put it this way: there's one person in particular at Marvel who is known for being pretty backstabby in terms of getting the products that she wants. And this is, I have now heard the same story independently from a dozen different people who say, yeah, this is what this creator does. This is what this writer does. And it's what's happening there. It's not the person who is just kind of a mean, terrible person who's out to just screw everyone over. This is how this person has decided to get leverage inside the company, to get stability. Because as a freelancer, as a contractor, they don't have any. And in general, this is one of the problems of a smallish company tucked away inside of a big company, is you know that you're not the big revenue stream. You know that even if the company has a 500% increase in profits, it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the bigger corporation. And this is the problem that places like that Marvel with Disney or DC with AT&T and Warner Media, that's a problem that they have, is no matter what they do, even if they're really successful for their small business unit, they're still tiny in the grand scheme of things. And that plays with people's minds. It's often a really tough place to work. It requires a certain personality type to be like that. This is not unlike, by the way, if you work for Microsoft and they make all their money off of Office 365 and Azure and kind of cloud hosting and kind of these big elements. And let's say you're the person who is in charge of the Microsoft keyboard division, the group that is producing a physical keyboard. Well, you're important to the business of the company. They're going to keep you around because they want to have this peripheral there. It's key to kind of what they do. But at the same time, no matter how successful your business unit is, you're going to be tiny. And that, it requires a lot of self-confidence for to work in a group like that. Because you have this combination of factors of people who are independent contractors with very little long-term stability, and then working inside of this big entity, those are two major factors that tend to really mess with people. And that's why you see some of what you see. And then the third factor is one I've talked about before, which is at times you are a complete unknown person, and at times you're a super celebrity. So when you get to go to cons, you get to stand up in front of a giant crowd. You get a bunch of people who are very, borderline obsessive about you. And by the way, here's an interesting thing that goes on within comic companies and comic creators. I've heard many, many times creators say things like the fans, the customers are obsessive and weird. They're crazy. There's a certain I've been asked for the 8,000th time this month that when are Venom the symbiote and Eddie Brock going to be in a homosexual relationship? I mean, never mind the fact is the Venom symbiote male, or is it just like a goo monster symbiote? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But nonetheless, Donny Cates has this question posed to him at every con and constantly on social media. And at one point, Donny Cates starts to suspect that some of the fans, the customers, are obsessive crazy. And he's not entirely wrong to think that. I mean, this is one of the areas where I've heard the argument of the customer's always right. You always have to acknowledge the customer. That makes sense. I get it. And as a retailer, absolutely, you have to do right by the customer. At the same time, If you have a customer that's screaming at you, when are you going to ship, the Venom Goo symbiote and Eddie Brock? At some point, no matter how great you are, no matter how customer forward facing, all those things, it's going to crumble under the face of this insanity. It just is going to. So, but picture the psychology of a creator who is dealing with this. Very kind of fans that are maybe a little bit more obsessive than normal. I mean, you heard the Sean Gordon Murphy, where we were talking about original art and people wanting commissions of like feet and like the Hulk and the Thing, but with male genitalia hanging out and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not that. I'll say safely, I don't think that's entirely normal. Okay, and if somebody was coming up to me asking me for those things, I couldn't help myself. I would think this person is out of their mind. But at the same time, when you go to cons, you get to stand up on a stage in front of thousands of these people chanting your name, rabidly interested to meet you. And it's hard not to feel like a huge celebrity, especially when they stand hours in line, buy pieces of your original artwork for thousands of dollars. I mean, this is going to be a head trip. There's no way around that. So when you put all these factors together, you're an independent contractor with very little long-term security. You work inside of a tiny company that's owned by a giant company where, no matter how successful you are, it doesn't matter. You are treated like a super celebrity, like, the biggest of the big stars. But at the same time, some of the people who are treating you that way are maybe a little insane. And that combination leads to a very strange mix that some personality types can handle and others will not. And so that results in a lot of very weird positioning. It's one of the reasons why creators, even though they go on, Zoom calls, and they look very confident and they're cocky and they're smiling and everything else, and even though that's all true, there is also a sense of, when is the world going to fall? When is this person over here that I don't really know going to backstab me? Hey, I see this person liking another person's tweet, and that person's an enemy of mine. Does that mean this person's plotting against me? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. And that's the dynamics of, in many cases, the comic industry. And you toss it, in addition to all that, it is a head trip to go to a con where you're treated like a super celebrity, and then meanwhile, your pay is, below what a manager at a Starbucks makes. That's a problem, right? That's a big problem, bluntly. Um, what are you going to do, right? I mean, it's very hard. Is it any wonder? We kind of question, why is it that some creators don't seem to care about money or talk about wanting to institute socialism? Well, if you're treated like a major celebrity and you have a bunch of power over these characters that are known, worldwide, but at the same time, the company isn't giving you a contract longer than 3 months, and you're paid like crap. Yeah, I mean, is it magic? You turn to socialism as your answer, or any number of crazy things. This is where this stuff goes. And so I'll say it. People have said, Perch just rambles about this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's important to kind of consider all these factors. Does that mean you have to you have to bow down to them? Does that mean you have to this excuses all bad behavior? No, of course not. But this is a lot of what goes into things. This is a lot of what goes through some people's minds. And you don't have to take my word for it. Again, I've done interviews with people where they talk about this stuff. And some of the most grounded, greatest interviews we have are people who acknowledge, A, this is happening, and B, here's my mechanism to keep from being sucked into all this craziness. That seems like a good plan. But it is a strange mix, and it's a strange business. But like I said at the beginning, if you work in a corporation, a company, chances are some elements of what I just said to you, other than probably the cons and all that kind of stuff, some elements of that probably sound familiar. They sound familiar because this is how a lot of businesses work. This is not uncommon for this is it's not uncommon. What I'm talking about is present. These kind of politics and backstabbing and feeling like a cog in a giant corporate machine without a lot of long-term security. I mean, all this stuff is familiar stuff. And comics just amplifies certain aspects of it based on the way it is, based on the amount of independent contractors, based on this weird convention thing that causes people's heads to get screwed on wrong sometimes. This is what's going on. Does this excuse bad behavior? Of course not, but it might explain some of it, and that's my piece of it. Anyway, it's funny. The best advice I can give people always is when I talk to people in the industry and they're like, well, do you think this person's attacking me or this? It's actually I don't even. Jim's up in his interview, which is a great interview. Outlined a lot of kind of the key points. Work hard, get some credibility. Every now and then you have to spend that credibility to get something for you to make you feel more stable and everything else. But make sure you have your own works moving along and progressing while you're working for a big corporation, so you're always protected. Common sense stuff and good thoughts. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And thanks for listening.